Have you ever been playing a Roblox game and all of a sudden you saw an animation like this? You see these types of animations everywhere, from the strongest battlegrounds all the way to brain rot games. These animations are a part of the reason why these games feel so alive, and every time I saw one, I always found myself wondering how people actually made them. So I've decided to find out for myself. Over the next 7 days, I'm planning on going from a Roblox animation noob to a Roblox animation master. Now, I know what you may be thinking. 7 days is not enough time to master anything, especially something as complex as animation. But in this challenge, I just want to see how far I could go in 7 days. So each day I'll be learning new techniques and animating harder and harder animations until I'm a Roblox animation master. And by the end of the challenge, my goal is to create a fully polished animation that puts everything that I've learned to the test. So let's get started with day 1. So first things first, I need to figure out what software I'm going to use to animate, and after doing some research, I found out that I have 2 options. I could either use Blender, which is a 3D modeling software that you can also animate in, or a Roblox Studio plugin called Moon Animator. Both of these options have some pros and cons. Blender is free and gives you lots of control over your animations, but it's way harder to learn, while on the other hand, Moon Animator is way easier to learn and use, but it costs $30 real. So after doing some thinking, I decided to just spend the $30 on Moon Animator. As soon as I bought it, I got right to work. I started watching a bunch of tutorials to start learning the basics, and after getting used to a bunch of important keybinds, I decided to make my first animation. After trying to think of a good animation to start with, I eventually decided to make a running animation. And after spending around an hour trying to get this to work, here's what I finished with. I was mainly trying to focus on recreating what an actual person running in real life looks like. And honestly, for my first animation, I think this came out really good. I put a ton of time into making that running animation, and I was starting to get really tired. But despite that, I kept going. I told myself that I had to do 3 more simple animations for the day, so I decided to make a backflip animation, a swimming animation, and the Gangnam style. Using what I learned from the running animation, I spent around 30 minutes on each one of these animations, and you can tell that I was starting to get tired because all 3 of them don't look very good. I tried using the same philosophy that I used for the running animation, where I tried to recreate what an actual person looks like performing the actions, but they just didn't look the same. The backflip animation turned out choppy, the swimming animation didn't look realistic, and the Gangnam style looked like he was riding a horse. With my confidence crushed, I decided to go to sleep for the night because it was getting pretty late. So for day 2, I went into it feeling pretty optimistic. Even though yesterday's animations were still pretty clunky, I finally felt comfortable using Moon Animator. That meant that I could stop worrying about learning the software and actually start focusing on something much harder, making my animations actually look good. To kick things off, I researched something called a run cycle. Instead of randomly moving each limb until it looked right, animators typically break animations down into 4 main poses: contact, down, passing, and up. Armed with this new knowledge, I tried making another running animation, and this was the result. Looking back, I completely skipped the contact and up poses, so instead of looking like a natural run cycle, it ended up looking like a Minecraft character sprinting. Still, it was definitely an improvement over what I made on day 1, and I was starting to understand how much difference proper posing could really make. After that, I decided to start taking suggestions from you guys. One comment asked me to animate someone chopping wood, and I thought that would be the perfect challenge because it meant I'd finally have to learn how to animate tools. I spent about an hour watching tutorials and experimenting with different ways to attach the axe to the character, and at first I welded it directly to the hand, but that meant that the axe was completely locked in place and couldn't rotate independently. After a lot of trial and error, I eventually figured out that welding it to the humanoid root part gave me the flexibility I needed to animate it properly. Once I finally got everything working, putting the actual animation together only took about 20 minutes. Honestly, I was super surprised by how well it turned out. For my final animation of the day, I picked another suggestion from my comments: the Moscow dance. This is a dance that a lot of people see in tons of games, but I'm pretty sure it originated from Team Fortress 2. This seemed like the perfect opportunity to learn camera animation since I wanted the movement to feel much more dynamic than my previous animations. Compared to the axe, camera animation was surprisingly intuitive, and after just 1 tutorial, I already had a pretty good grasp of it, so I used it to make the Moscow dance feel much more energetic. And this is how it all came out. Overall, day 2 felt like a huge turning point. I wasn't just animating characters anymore, I was actually building scenes. But still, something felt off, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. So I called it a night. The next morning, after watching my animations back a few more times, I finally realized what had been bothering me. Even though I was getting better at building scenes, the movement itself still looked really robotic. So that became my main goal for day 3, making my animations feel smoother and more natural. I decided to spend the day animating comments from you guys, starting with this one right here. Based on this comment, I decided to make a short action sequence where a ninja throws some ninja stars at a wall before doing a roll. I figured that this would be the perfect opportunity to practice timing and momentum, and get even more comfortable animating welded tools. The ninja stars gave me a bit of trouble at first since they weren't moving the way I wanted them to, but after some trial and error, I eventually got them working. After that, most of my time went into getting the roll to feel believable. If the timing was even slightly off, the whole animation immediately looked awkward. After about an hour of experimenting and making small adjustments, this was the final result. Overall, I think it came out really well, and it already felt much smoother than anything I'd made in the previous 2 days. Next, I decided to animate this comment. It's basically a direct reflection of yesterday's wood chopping animation, but instead of chopping wood with an axe, this time I was animating someone mining some ore with a pickaxe. The crazy part was that this only took me about 5 minutes. Yesterday I spent over an hour just figuring out how to animate a tool correctly, but today I barely had to think about it. It was one of the first moments where I could actually see myself improving instead of just feeling like I was. To wrap up the day, I wanted to animate one of my own ideas, a noob going down a slide. I figured this would be another great way to practice timing and momentum, since if either of these were off, the entire animation would immediately feel terrible. Animating him going up the ladder ended up being pretty tedious to animate, but getting the timing of the slide itself actually went much smoother than I expected. Looking back, I think the ninja animation earlier in the day really helped me get a better feel for how momentum should actually look. I still think it's a tiny bit clunky, but overall I was really happy with how it turned out. By the end of day 3, I finally felt like my animations were starting to move naturally instead of just moving from one pose to another looking terrible. But after watching everything back, I realized that there was still another layer that I was missing. I started day 4 by watching this really in-depth tutorial by Tycoon where I learned about easing styles and face packs. After finishing the tutorial, I decided to jump right into animating some more viewer recommendations. I started the day by animating this person's comment where I implemented face packs and easing styles for the first time. I spent a ton of time familiarizing myself with the different easing style properties, and after some trial and error, I got it all working. I combined walking cycles, face packs, welding, camera movement, and easing styles all into one animation for the first time, and this is how it came out.
Huh?
I think it came out really good. Next up, I animated this comment where I made a guy bench press some weight, and compared to the previous animation that I just did, this was a breeze. It was a combination of tool welding, a walk animation, and a sprinkle of nice camera movements with applied easing styles. This is how it came out. To wrap up the day, I animated this comment, which ironically enough, I thought would be the easiest to animate, but it turned out to be the hardest. I've seen this meme before on YouTube Shorts and Instagram, and I thought that different easing styles like bounce would be great for this, but it was really hard to nail the unique look of the invincible wobble edits. This is how it came out. It looks pretty bad, but hey, at least I tried. By the end of the day, I felt super accomplished. I learned 2 new crucial elements of Roblox animation, but something still felt missing. I got off super satisfied, ready for what awaits me tomorrow. Going into day 5, I felt like I had a pretty good grasp on most of the core animation techniques that I'd been learning throughout the week. But after looking back at everything that I'd made so far, I realized that there was one thing that I had barely touched: lighting. Up until this point, every animation I'd made took place during the daytime, so I wanted to challenge myself by creating something with a much darker atmosphere. I started by animating this comment. I figured that animating some kind of monster chase scene would be a perfect way of implementing lighting animation, since I know it's gonna have to be dark. After getting started, I realized that this was my first time animating a non-blocky character, since the monster is using a completely custom rig. Once I got used to animating the monster, I came upon a new obstacle. Getting the lighting to actually look good took way longer than I expected. I knew almost nothing about Roblox lighting, so I spent a lot of time experimenting with different settings until I finally found something something that I liked. Everything was going super smoothly until I got to the very end. I wanted the character that was getting chased by the monster to get saved by a bacon hair, and I was gonna make the bacon hair punch the monster out of the frame. Animating this made me realize another problem. No matter what I tried, every punch looked super stiff and awkward. Eventually, after I did a lot of tweaking, I eventually finished the animation, and this is how it came out. Overall, I was really happy with how the lighting turned out, but I couldn't stop noticing how unnatural the punch looked. So instead of avoiding the problem, I decided to tackle it head on. I picked another comment that revolved entirely around combat and animated a bacon hair fighting a noob. I figured the more punches I animated, the better I'd eventually get at them. Unfortunately, that wasn't exactly how it went. Even after spending a lot of time experimenting, I still couldn't figure out how to make the hits feel powerful or believable. This is the final product. Looking back, the animation itself wasn't bad. The movement was pretty solid, the camera looked pretty good, but the punches still felt stiff, and that one issue kept holding the entire animation back. But disregarding that, to wrap up the day, I wanted to take a break from humanoid animations altogether, and I found the perfect comment to animate next. It pretty much revolves around a burger eating a guy, and this was my first time animating a non-humanoid character, and honestly it ended up being one of the most fun animations that I've made so far. Not because it was super hard or challenging, but it was just a nice change of pace. I did run into a few problems getting the burger to disappear and reappear at the right time, but after a little experimenting, everything came together pretty good. Here's the final product. By the end of day 5, I felt like I'd finally figured out how to make my scenes look much more cinematic with lighting and atmosphere. But I had also discovered a brand new weakness. No matter how good the rest of my animations looked, my combat still felt really stiff. But if we push that aside, I think I made a lot of important progress today. After everything that I learned yesterday, I finally understood why my combat animation still felt really stiff. It wasn't because I was missing some secret animation technique, it was because I wasn't spending enough time polishing the small details that sold each movement. So for day 6, my goal was simple: stop rushing my animations. I need to focus on making every movement feel as believable as possible. I started with this comment where a noob is cooking bacon, he starts eating it, and then gets punched by a bacon hair walking past. Compared to the fights I animated yesterday, I wanted this one to feel much more impactful. Surprisingly, this animation wasn't technically difficult anymore. At this point, I knew how to animate walk cycles, combat, lighting, camera movement, and pretty much everything I'd learned throughout the week. The difficult part wasn't knowing what to do, it was having the patience to actually do it. I spent almost 4 hours on this single animation, constantly making tiny adjustments to every single movement. In order for the punch to feel real, it has to have real effects on its environment, so I made sure to emphasize the noob getting recoiled after getting punched. He goes flying into the wall and he slides down. It makes it look even more realistic, therefore making the punch higher quality. Once I was finally happy with all of the movement, I decided to learn one more technique that I've been wanting to try all week: impact frames. Since I already spent time experimenting with Roblox lighting yesterday, learning impact frames ended up being much easier than I expected. After watching one tutorial, I realized that they were very simple to make. I added them to the punch, and this is the final result.
Huh?
Honestly, this is my favorite animation that I've made so far. For the first time, it actually felt like something I'd actually see in a real Roblox game. Next, I animated this comment, where a noob buys a hot dog and then falls into the back rooms. This animation wasn't about learning anything new. Instead, it was about reinforcing everything that I'd already practiced. And after animating for around 3 hours, here's the final result.
Huh?
It wasn't nearly as flashy as the first animation, literally, because there was no impact frames, but I was really happy with how clean it turned out. By the end of day 6, I realized something that completely changed the way that I looked at animation. At the beginning of the challenge, I thought becoming a better animator meant constantly learning new techniques. But after spending 4 hours polishing a single animation, I realized the biggest difference between a decent animation and a great one usually isn't some secret trick. It's simply taking the time to sell every single movement. That was probably the biggest lesson that I've learned throughout the entire challenge. And now there was only one thing left to do: put everything that I learned over the last 6 days into one final animation. For day 7, I took a step back and looked at everything I'd made over the past week. Just 6 days ago, I knew nothing about Moon Animator, and now I know so much. I can make entire scenes by myself with no tutorials. And for day 7, there was only one thing left to do: put everything together into one final animation. I spent some time going through all your animation suggestions again, and I noticed that a bunch of people wanted me to animate a robbery. So that's exactly what I decided to do. The idea was simple: a thief robs a gas station, he tries to make his escape, and then he gets stopped by Superman. Before I even start animating, I want to build a proper environment for the scene, because if I'm being honest, I'm kind of bored of animation. It was lots of fun, but if I'm being real, it feels like I've hit some kind of plateau. I spent around 2 hours making this little gas station scene for my animation, but honestly, I think it was worth every minute. It immediately made the animation feel much more like a real game cutscene. Once I finished the scene, I immediately started to animate. The robbery itself actually came together super fast, and if I'm being honest, I finished the whole animation in 45 minutes. And this is the final product. It's pretty good, but honestly, I think my day 6 animations were better. So the question is, can you master Roblox animation in 7 days? No, you can't, but you can definitely learn it. Even though I've learned a ton in the past week, there's still an incredible amount that I don't know. And there are professional Roblox animators that have spent years refining their craft. But when I compare my very first animation to what I created on days 6 and 7, the difference is honestly kind of crazy. I had an absolute blast making these animations, and I'm definitely going to keep improving. If you stuck around to this point, I really appreciate it. This is my first time ever making a long form video on YouTube, and I'm really proud of how it came out. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.